Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here today with William J. Kole, author of a new book titled In Guns We Trust, The Unholy Trinity of White Evangelicals, Politics, and Firearms. He is a former foreign correspondent who has reported from North America, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Bill joined the Associated Press in Detroit, where he wrote about Dr. Jack Kevorkian. As an AP foreign correspondent, he covered some big stories, including the crash that killed Princess Diana, the arrest of former Yugoslav strongman Slobodan Milosevic, the death of Pope John Paul II, and Kosovo's independence. His earlier book was titled The Big 100, The New World of Super Aging. It was inspired by two extraordinary women, Jean Calment, who lived to 122, and his own grandmother, Marie Mercurio Sansone, who was born in 1899 and died in 2003, just shy of her 104th birthday. Bill was a 2022 Fellow in Aging Journalism at Columbia University in New York and at the National Press Foundation in Washington. He has won several awards, but the one he's most proud of is from the Society of American Business Editors and Writers for an investigation into the exploitation of undocumented immigrants by the Walmart retail chain. Bill grew up in Massachusetts, studied journalism at Boston University, and speaks French, Dutch, and German. I wish I did. Today he lives in Rhode Island, where you might see him running the roads or fly fishing and sailing on the upper reaches of Narragansett Bay. You can learn more at his website, billkolebooks.com. That's Billkole books.com. So, Bill, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations on all your work.
Thank you. It's such a privilege to be with you, Brian.
Well, no, the reverse is true. But what else would you like folks to know about you?
Well, you mentioned the fly fishing. I actually just launched a Substack called The Fly Guy, so you
Ah,
can find me there. This is my alter ego. Honestly, the journalistic work is filled with so much death and dismemberment, and it can be a bit of a bummer. And so when I need to sort of decompress, I take my fly rod and go catch some bass or trout. And my Substack, The Fly Guy, is just a sort of bunch of ruminations about what fly fishing has taught me about the
ah.
meaning of life, and it's a lot of fun, and I think people will enjoy it.
Well, it's funny because a couple of my other author friends that I just interviewed, within the last week or two, are also avid fly fishermen. So Brian McLaren and Wes Granberg Michelson are both, they're friends themselves and they fly fish together. And, it's like, I guess I need to take that up. I've only done it once, but it sounds like it's fun.
It is fun. It's great. Yeah.
So before we talk about your books, could you tell us what it was like to work at the Associated Press? That sounds like a really interesting and fun experience, but
You
I'm
know,
not
it
sure
was
if that's always the case.
Well, it was the honor of my life to work for
Uh,
AP. I was with them for 31 years. I'm kind of semi-retired now. I work part-time for Axios, another news
yeah.
company, as an editor. Uh, but I started my career in Detroit, as you mentioned, finished it back in my native New England, but worked mostly as a foreign correspondent in Europe and just was able to do so many fun stories. Yeah, people ask me, what was your favorite story? And there were so many. But I have to say, hands down, uh, it was Pluto's demotion to a dwarf planet at a, at a meeting of international astronomers in Prague in the Czech Republic. And I think this was in 2006, where poor Pluto was, unceremoniously stripped of its status. And it happened just a few weeks before the new school year would began. And so all these teachers had to, remove a ball from the mobile that was,
Right.
hanging from the classroom ceiling. And some of the astronomers held up little plush toys of Pluto, the Disney
Oh
dog,
yeah, right, right, right.
and some were weeping. I mean, it was quite a scene. They were not all on the same page. Anyway, this is the kind of wonderful thing you get to do with AP, and they are doing essential work now,
Yeah.
and really are honorable journalists who are fair and just. And I can't say more, enough good things about AP.
Well, I would think that the travel that you were able to do too would have been wonderful.
Yeah, except, after a while you boomerang from one summit to one, man-made disaster to
Uh,
one act of God, and the next thing you know, your laundry is undone, and your kids are wondering if they still have a father,
uh,
and a little too much of a good thing.
yeah, I can believe that too. So, as I mentioned, your earlier book was titled The Big 100, The New World of Super Aging. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, it was inspired by two women. When I based in Paris for AP in the mid 90s, I wrote about Jeanne Calment, who is still, although she passed a couple of years after I covered her, she's still the oldest human being who ever lived, whose age could be authenticated by records.
Hmm.
And she lived to 122 years and 164 days.
Jeez.
And my favorite quote of hers was, "I only have one wrinkle and I'm sitting on it," which I thought was absolutely hilarious. She said that when she was 121,
Ah,
which is really funny. And then my grandmother, whose life, as you mentioned, touched parts of 3 centuries, and was a larger than life figure in my family. The book kind of explores how many more of us will be living to 100 and how that's going to change our
hmm,
society. The United Nations says we're in the middle of a longevity revolution, and by 2050, just 2.5 decades from now, the numbers of centenarians, people who live to 100 or more, will increase 8 times over.
really?
And so I just wanted to look at how our society is changing, because we are still very much a youth-oriented culture, and yet we are graying at by virtually every metric. So I
Interesting.
will say we just lost Jane Goodall,
Hmm.
whom I interviewed for the Big 100,
Okay.
and I dug out a quote yesterday. I just want to read this because I thought this was just so illuminating. Jane Goodall, who died at 91 and was, by my definition, a super ager, somebody, she didn't reach 100, okay, but she worked tirelessly right up to her last breath. She was
Hmm.
actually on a speaking tour in California when she
Hmm.
passed away. And she told me this for the Big 100. She said that she was giving a big lecture, and someone asked what her next adventure would be, and she said, "Well, dying." And there was a kind of a gasp that went around this huge auditorium. But when you die, she told me, there's either nothing, in which case I don't have to worry anymore, or there's something. And if there is something, which I happen to believe, then what an adventure it will be to discover what that is.
Oh my
And
goodness, what a neat
it
perspective.
just gives me chills. And honestly too, Brian, Jane Goodall was the consummate scientist, and yet still was a person of faith.
Hmm.
In our MAGA moment now, it seems like we've dispensed with science, or at least half of our population
Attempting to.
has. So anyway, I'll
Wow.
get off my soapbox
Yeah,
there, but
no. Well, my stepmother lived to be over 101. And up until 2 months before she passed, she was still living at home by herself and driving. And fine. She was really in great shape. It was just amazing.
that's fantastic. Yeah.
I
The
wish I had
driving
the
bit, the
genes.
driving bit is a little,
Yeah, well,
I addressed that in my book because my mother who's 94 now, the daughter of my grandmother who lived to almost 104, was driving up until a couple of years ago. And believe it or not, at 91, they renewed her driver's license for 5 years,
oh wow.
which meant she wouldn't have to go back until she was 96. And then at 96, had she stayed on the road, would they just have automatically renewed it until she was 101? I mean, it's like,
Well, my,
not
my mom
sure.
had to take a driving test every year.
Oh, well, that's good. That's
She
good
lived in
policy.
Illinois, and that was the rule in Illinois.
Yeah, right.
And, every time she'd pass with flying colors, and she asked them, is there anything I should be doing differently? And they said, no, you're great. So
Fantastic. I
she was
love it.
really,
Yeah.
it's just incredible, amazing.
Sounds
All
like.
right, so let's get to your book. The title again is In Guns We Trust, the Unholy Trinity of White Evangelicals, Politics, and Firearms. So how did that book come about?
So the genesis of the book was that I actually had extensive experience in evangelical Christianity. I came to faith in an evangelical church at the end of college in the early 1980s, and actually even worked for 3 years as a lay missionary.
Hmm,
I was a worship leader for a mega church in Massachusetts,
hmm,
and an elder for some other churches, around Europe and New England. And I left that movement because of its position on guns and other social issues. Honestly, I was always a misfit. But the genesis of all of this was that I was rehearsing with my worship band when my bass player showed up for practice with a 9 millimeter semi-automatic. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I said, why? What, Jesus, Prince of Peace? Why are you carrying a weapon? And that sort of set me on a kind of a quest to figure out. Up till that point, honestly, Brian, I didn't realize that so many white evangelicals carry guns, including bringing them to church on Sundays. And once my bass player kind of, revealed this issue to me, I found it was far more extensive than I could ever have imagined. And I had to figure out,
hmm,
as a journalist, how did this happen and why is this continuing?
hmm, hmm. Wow. So how long did it take you to research the book?
I spent about 18 months really immersing myself in the gun culture,
Hmm.
in Christian nationalism, which is really sort of uh, kind of soaks into all of this, really. I even joined the NRA, believe it or not, just so I would have street cred with some of the people I needed to approach for interviews.
Uh-huh.
And also, I wanted to see how the National Rifle Association was communicating with its members. Really toxic stuff. It's all in the book. I told somebody the other day, I actually, after I joined the NRA, I had to run out to meet my mailman one day and just try and explain to him why he was bringing all this junk mail and this stuff. Because I knew he was freaked out. We had had conversations before. He knew I was not a gun guy. And I had to just kind of explain what that was all about. But yeah, I traveled quite extensively into the American heartland, uh, although this is a problem in evangelical churches from coast to coast and also in blue states as well. Uh, and I went to Europe where there was a mass shooting, one in the UK in Scotland in 1996, and within months they solved that problem, and there's not been a mass
Hmm.
shooting at a school since then. Just to
Wow.
illustrate that this can be
Wow.
fixed, believe it or not.
Wow. So I think, a lot of us have some, understanding, shallow, of the gun industry's influence. Can you kind of help educate us a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 9 billion a year industry, largely unregulated, and it has white evangelical fingerprints all over it.
Hmm,
Evangelicals play an outsized role in running some of the big gun companies in the United States.
hmm,
One in particular is called Daniel Defense, which is based in Georgia, and they made the AR-15 style weapons used in the school massacre in Uvalde, Texas, as well as some of the rifles that were used in what is still the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. That was uh, that shooting on the Las Vegas Strip
hmm.
by a sniper up in the
Yeah.
hotel, shooting down at the country music revelers. And they claim to make these weapons for the glory of God, and I'm not kidding you. Okay. Just to show you how objectively grotesque this is, a few Easters ago, one of their social media posts was an open Bible with a AR-15 style uh, military assault rifle on top of the Bible and a crucifix draped over all of that. And the post was, "He is risen."
Oh, jeez.
And then they posted another one, which they've since deleted, where it was a photo of sort of taken from above of a small boy uh, sitting cross-legged on the floor with with an AR-15 in his lap, and it said, quoting from the Proverbs, um, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart from it.
Oh
I
man.
mean, so like this superimposition of scripture and mashup of the Bible and these weapons is absolutely incredible to me.
Why do you think that coupling is so tight between guns and white evangelicals?
So, this whole thing kind of dates back to the 70s when evangelicals started to become aware that they had political power. Up until then, there evangelicals were kind of relegated to, the street corner, and they weren't really part of of our civil discourse that much. And then, prayer in the public schools was challenged all the way up to the highest court in the land. And with that was the emergence of some of these big evangelical leaders like Jerry Falwell, even Billy Graham to some extent, realized and capitalized on the growing awareness that evangelicals actually had a voice, and could affect political change in the country. And a lot of it is pretty smarmy and awful, actually, because a lot of what was happening during that time was um, desegregation, and white evangelicals didn't want to necessarily see that happen,
Right.
and but rather than sort of coalesce around issues of segregation, which was really not going to hold them in very good light with the rest of the country, they kind of latched on to some key social issues. One, of course, was abortion, and the other was guns. And so, all of this was sort of then cast as issues of essentially religious freedom, And so now, fast forward to today, and you have evangelicals who really believe that the Second Amendment is breathed by God. It's almost like scripture.
So it's basically a means to an end to get power.
Yeah, there's kind of a two-edged sword to it here. So that yes, to have power and influence, and they are certainly enjoying that at this moment. We can see, you know, Donald Trump's base is, his most faithful supporters include, white evangelicals. But also just, there has been this growing sense among evangelicals, and again, I was one for 35 years myself, that, the culture beyond the church doors is conspiring against them. And, there's this fear factor that is very much at play. It's what drives gun sales, and it's what, drives uh, Christians to arm themselves. This fear that they are coming for us. I'm not sure who they are, but they're coming for our Bibles. They're coming for our guns. They're coming for our very way of life, all of which is nonsense. No one's coming. No one's coming for anybody's guns. Yes, there are lots of progressive Christians, and I'm one of them, and I think you are too, Brian, who would like to see common sense restrictions on guns because we have a uniquely American gun scourge. But that doesn't mean that anyone is conspiring to, disarm the population.
Hmm. Hmm. So I'd like to share a couple of the reviews of the book. This one is from Publishers Weekly. Kole makes trenchant points about how fear, change, and social instability have altered the role of faith and identity in America. It's a revealing window into the evolution of one of today's most divisive social issues. So, it's kind of to the point that you were making, a moment ago about the impact of fear and change, and social instability. But it just seems like it's so strong. That, before Trump got elected the first time, I kind of knew there was a segment of the population like this. I had no idea it was as big, or as strong or as driven as what it's turned out to be.
Yeah, it really is. And, again, another factor in all of this is although there are quite a few white evangelicals, by some counts, up to 60 million Americans identify as, who are white, identify as evangelical Christians. And, that's a potent political force. These people can be counted on, obviously, to elect uh, people to Congress and to their state legislatures and to their governor's offices who share their viewpoints on guns and other things. But even though that is a sizable, cohort, uh, we see, right, that evangelicals are losing clout and numbers, and the largest growing um, subset of the population right now is what we would call the nuns,
Right.
Nones, not
Right.
Nuns, but people who have no particular religious convictions. And so, if you project out, within a few short decades, there's going to be far fewer evangelicals among us, and they know it. And I think some of this is a bit of a thrashing about, desperately trying to maintain influence and a place in the society.
Hmm.
So there's just a lot to unpack here.
hmm
Yeah.
hmm So here's another review from Shannon Watts, founder of Moms Demand Action, who says, prepare for a compelling journey that will reshape your understanding of faith, power, and the pervasive grip of gun culture in America. So what in particular would you say that your book adds to the story about this, kind of guns, religion topic? Because there's been several books published about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I think this is the first book that really pulls back the curtain on white evangelical complicity in our gun crisis.
Hmm.
Because again, uh, and maybe I should just be more clear, somewhere between 41 and 65% of white evangelicals keep guns in their home
Hmm.
for personal protection. I'm not talking here about guns for hunting or, shooting sports, but
Wow.
actually, for personal protection. And, so that's incredible, right? And then we already talked about the outsized influence of evangelicals running the very gun companies themselves. But by exerting their political influence, they are arguably standing in the way of the common sense gun reforms that surveys consistently
hmm
show most Americans want.
Yeah.
Things like a ban on military style assault rifles. You will never convince me. I'm sorry, no one will ever convince me that an AR-15 is something that a civilian needs to have. It's just you will never win that argument with me. Um, and then things like universal background checks, because it's still possible to get a weapon without one at some gun shows, and also through private sales of weapons that trade hands. And 80% or more of Americans want these things. And evangelicals, because of their absolute, obsession with guns and gun culture, are really standing in the way here. This is so. I think this book, in that sense, sort of pulls that curtain back to
Hmm.
really show, what is going on here. Because I think the central argument I make in Guns We Trust is that we are not going to solve this unless we can engage somehow with white evangelicals and get
Hmm.
them to rethink their position on guns.
So yeah, let's get to the whole what do we do about it, aspect of this. I mean, first of all, it's just in terms of guns on the street. How do we deal with that kind of like short term?
It's so hard, there are really interesting uh, initiatives happening, but there are just so many guns. There are gun amnesty programs where you could turn in your weapon, no questions asked. There are many, many programs in cities around the United States. I sat in on one in New Mexico where, people can pull up and bring in their guns, and in exchange for turning them in, and then they are destroyed. They are given uh, gift cards, and it, an AR-15 might fetch them a couple $100, and
Mm.
a beat up old pistol or a 22 rifle might only get them $100 or $50, but they're taking guns off the street. But really, there are just so many. There are so many guns. We don't even know how many there are. There are, by the most reliable counts, about 120 uh, guns for every 100 Americans. And
Yeah,
that puts
yeah.
us right at the top of the world rankings.
By far, right?
Yeah, yes, yes.
And by far in terms of mass shootings or deaths or, however you want to measure.
Now, and that's just it. And I'm so glad you mentioned, that, because, our preoccupation rightly is with mass shootings and our kids. But let's not forget that the biggest, uh, the greatest number of gun deaths is actually suicides. You know, the we're running around 47,000 gun deaths a year in the United States, and about 27,000 of those are suicides.
Wow.
And so that's a horrible, loss of life. And obviously, if there were fewer guns, people, look, if you're going to make an attempt with a firearm, you're probably going to succeed,
Mhm.
as opposed to, I'm not advocating for other means here. I'm just saying, that this is, and there are other, accidental deaths, and this is astonishing to me, but accidental gun deaths are now the number one killer of American children, more even than car accidents.
Wow.
So, people don't properly store their guns in the home, and a child gets a hold of them, they play with it, and the next thing you know, you have a tragedy.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then you have domestic violence where, if there's a gun in the home, the chances of that escalating into a homicide, are exponentially higher. So
Mhm.
that, this is the NRA doesn't want you to know this, but your home becomes more dangerous, not safer, the moment you bring a gun inside.
Absolutely.
That's just
Absolutely.
statistically the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And very clearly,
Yeah.
you compared to other countries, for instance, right? I mean,
Well, again, I spent, almost 20 years living outside the United States as a foreign correspondent. You just don't find this kind of gun violence anywhere else. This is a really uniquely American scourge. And, we like to talk about American exceptionalism. Oh, we're exceptional, all
yeah,
right,
really.
but not in the ways that we really want to be.
Uh-huh.
And this is certainly one of them.
So you mentioned a moment ago that you think the key is basically convincing white evangelicals that they're wrong. I mean, that's a tough sell, right? I mean, when people are so entrenched and it's a religious issue, not just a factual, kind of an argument. So how do we
It
do
is. Well, you're right. It's really hard. I'm not going to, I won't, I'm not going to lie, right? This is a very hard, because we're all dug in. They're dug in, and so are we.
it? Yeah.
Um, but I think, a couple of things, a couple of thoughts. One is that evangelicals are not a monolith any more than any other group. And there are people, who have misgivings about firearms. And there are some who I think are persuadable.
Hmm.
I actually, in my travels for the book, uh, it was kind of an epiphany for me, actually. I'll give you two examples. I went down to Alabama to visit a church that built a firing range on the church property. So its members could,
Shoot.
practice, firing their AR-15s and other weapons. It was for fellowship, and actually even for proselytizing. It was an outreach of the church. Come and shoot your gun, and then attend Sunday service, and come to know Jesus. And this was astonishing to me. But I met with the pastor, and I walked in there, and I really wanted him to be a caricature. I think I had my mind made up that this guy was just a meme. And he turned out to be an extremely thoughtful man, who really opened up to me about how he wrestled with the decision to do this. I still don't, I don't agree with him,
You still
but I
did.
but he still did it, but he was, he was very thoughtful about it. He wanted to, his motivation was to help people hone their skills so that they could, mount a defense in case of a home invasion or some other thing. And he also was a very kind man. He and his wife adopted 10 children with cystic fibrosis, and which is like a huge commitment. A huge. So this man was a true Christian and a real thoughtful guy, and a guy that you could talk to, And he actually said to me, and it's in the book, he said, "Look, I'm, when I die and I face the Lord, I may find out I was wrong about this, and if so, I just pray for God's mercy because I went forward with this and the understanding that I tried to, obtain." That was one example. Another example was I went to Indiana, where one of these Christian-owned gun manufacturers was based, and run by a bunch of brothers and cousins. They make high-capacity military-style rifles. And again, I wanted them to be a caricature, and they were very, very engaging with me. And at one point, actually asked me, "Tell us what you're hearing from the other side," meaning from progressive Christians who, want to do something about this gun crisis, because we'd really like to know, more about what they're thinking and what their position is, because maybe we're missing something here. The point is there was dialogue, there was, they didn't persuade me, and I don't think I persuaded them, but at least we got to talking. And I just don't see any way around this problem if we don't somehow engage. And I think for me, we're going to do it one evangelical and one gun at a time.
Mm, mm. Now, that's a long road.
Yeah.
But I don't know a better way other than, I mean, I really think that we've got to do something about political contributions and the size of political contributions from anyone, including the gun industry. So I really think that that has to be heavily regulated, more like it used to be before Citizens United, and now we can get big companies and big interests that can buy their way into controlling the government. So
Yeah, it's a real problem, and they're slinging money all over the place, and even to it's Republicans who are taking some of these campaign contributions from the NRA
Mhm.
and other gun groups. Yeah, you're right. You're right. They're buying influence, and I always thought it was interesting though that in red states you can't get elected unless you have an A rating from the National Rifle
Yeah,
Association.
yeah.
And then the on the other side of the aisle, you've got Democrats who are actually get F ratings and proudly wear that like a badge of honor because they're so reviled by the NRA and yeah, why not? I mean, clearly they're doing something right in order to earn their wrath.
So, putting all the effort you did into this book, had to mean a lot to you. I mean, what after now that it's released to the world, what would you summarize your experience as having been?
Well, it was a very difficult period researching and reporting the book. I had already left evangelicalism, but I think there were still some bits of it within my soul. You don't stay enmeshed in or engaged in a faith community for 35 years without it sort of getting its hooks into you. That really has led me, quite frankly, and in all transparency, into kind of deconstructing my own faith, questioning what I believe. And it's been a very painful process,
Hmm.
but it's a good process. And, unlike a lot of younger Americans I see who have been, or younger believers who are deconstructing, I'm also reconstructing. So I'm committed to trying to figure out what my faith is going to look like going forward. But it's not going to have guns in it, and it's not going to, be cruel toward the LGBTQ plus community or to people of color or to migrants, all of whom are dear to the heart of Jesus Christ. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what would you say that you would most want people to take away from the book?
I really I hope that people will rethink those who read it, who are gun owners, will rethink, why do I feel like I need this weapon? What am I afraid of? And fear is the antithesis of faith, right? I mean, you really they just it's oil and water. They just don't go together. And so I really hope that, my suspicion is that, if evangelicals read the book, they'll hate read it. But that's okay. Just read it, hate read it. I don't care. And for others, I think my real, um, it's kind of an entreaty, if you will, is just, it's so easy to demonize, uh, white evangelicals who have guns. A lot of them have multiple guns. Um, it's really easy to demonize them and hate them, and we're not going to get anywhere in fixing this problem if we don't get off of that position and somehow find ways to engage.
Mm.
One way that I have had some success in just, one-on-one conversations with people who have guns is to appeal to um, their respect for the sanctity of life, right? So, I mean, I think a lot of evangelicals, I personally am, I support women's reproductive freedoms, but the bedrock political, position of most white evangelicals is that they are anti-abortion. Um, so, like, how does this gun thing fit into being pro-life? It doesn't. Nor for does uh, capital punishment, right? Because I mean, this is another issue that progressive Christians are trying to persuade others to rethink.
Yeah, yeah.
We let me get this straight. We kill people in order to uh, get people not to kill people. I mean, it doesn't quite add up to me, but maybe I'm missing something.
So I know you're in the midst of, an important new book launch, but is there anything in the future that you're able to talk to us about, whether it's in terms of books or other projects?
Oh, I'll always have some projects going. This is my second career. I mentioned at the top about my passion for fly fishing, and I'm trying to sort of uh, write these whimsical essays about my adventures, misadventures, blunders and wonders of fly fishing around the world, what it's taught me about myself and life, and that may become a book at some point. And otherwise, I'm always on the prowl. I think honestly, Brian, after this book, I need a little bit of a palate cleanse.
You need
So
a break.
yes, I
Yeah,
need a little. It's just something light and frothy.
sure.
Fly fishing seems to fit the bill nicely.
Good,
Yeah.
good. I can totally appreciate that. Well, Bill, thanks so much for joining us, and really congratulations on this important book and all the work that you put into it. Again, the name of the title of the book is In Guns We Trust, The Unholy Trinity of White Evangelicals, Politics, and Firearms. And you can learn more at either Broadleaf Books or BillKohlBooks.com. So, Bill, thanks again, and best wishes on this important book.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate your interest in this subject and your passion for helping us all to fix it.
Thank you. Thank you.